With higher gas prices, the cost of losses through either theft or mismanagement is even more costly to businesses. We're going to talk about what you need to know around those two areas and a whole bunch of other things looking at AI, the current, and the future. So joining us today is James Hervey. He is Executive Vice President Commander powered by Verifone, and somebody I've known in the industry pretty much as long as I've been in the industry. So great seeing you again, James.
Yeah, good to see you, Jeff. We, for those who don't know, Jeff and I worked together at NACS many years ago and did quite a lot of fun projects together during that time. It's great to be here. I love the podcast, Jeff, and thanks for having me.
And of course, you are one of three family members who worked for NACS. So
Yes.
that was interesting times where we serve family businesses, and we had family businesses here.
Honestly,
so
maybe
cool.
four, Jeff, because I seem to remember my daughter when she was like 7 or 8 putting handouts on chairs at the NACS show. So
Yeah, she was. So we've been in the industry for a while. Want to just kind of walk us through like some of the evolution with, I remember when I first started, the big thing was electronic bills of lading, and just whether it's through, at the time there was PCATs, which was the technology standard spin-off from NACS, which became Connexus. You want to walk us through kind of the evolution of technology in your world, and that kind of can set up some of the conversation for later.
Sure. Well, thinking specifically about the topic today, Jeff, and that question, I think what you realize is that the technology journey to a large degree has been moving from, human movement of data to automated movement of data, right? And that's important for this topic and important in general, because when humans have to move data, and that could be anything, right? If you think about entering the price of a product into a point of sale versus scanning it, right? You're asking the human to move the data, the price of the item, into the POS. Whereas if you scan it, it's all automated. Or you mentioned e-bills of lading, right? I mean, in the old days, you would sit down at the manager workstation and key in the paper bill of lading, right? Or key in the invoice from the vendor. The thing about those human movements of data is they are much more error prone than automated movement of data. And so, error does two things. Error can create phantom loss, right? Which is when you think you lost something because someone keyed something in wrong, or it can just create so much noise that it's very difficult to truly find the signal, right? Particularly on high volume, high loss products. So I think, we've seen this move from human entered data to automation. We've seen, some algorithmic work done in terms of being able to put controls into a point of sale. And I think where we're moving next is to start, using the data with a combination of machine learning to start actually not just using automation to move the data, but using automation to make decisions on the data.
And not to belabor the past, but as long as I've known you, the line we've had at meetings, whether it's the NACS Day of the Industry Summit or anywhere else, is we have so much data, we don't know what to do with it. And now we have even more data, but there are some more effective ways to do something with it, and of course AI plays a role. And
right.
AI, they're kind of two camps of people right now. Those who've dabbled with AI and it's like, I don't know, it doesn't really work for this or that. And then others that are really steeped in it and are finding some uses that make the people equation more effective as opposed to replacing the people. And you had talked about how people are involved in these processes, but getting people out of things that, others can do better.
Yeah, well, look, I think, Jeff, there's a few things to unpack there. So let me start with the data. I think I'll start there. First, I want to say we're in a really good position in this industry when it comes to data, right? generally the big problem with data is that it's not normalized, and you've got to figure out how to normalize it and get it into some format that's useful. Because of the work that NACS and Connexus have done over the years, our data is very structured, right? Particularly coming out of the point of sale. I was personally playing around with doing some machine learning on my laptop the other week when I was sick. And my ability to take transaction data out of the system in a JSON format with clearly defined tags and import it into a parser was very, very easy, right? Because it was all an XML schema definition. The other thing I'll say is, across the point of sales, everybody defines categories differently. So if you're trying to do some machine learning on categories, right, like you've got to be able to take whatever the category is listed in the POS and normalize it across multiple stores. I used the NACS category definitions and boom, right? I was able to build a normalization table from it was actually Claude that built all this. I just told Claude to do it, right? And I think that gets me to the second part of your question, which is, in my own experience with using artificial intelligence, and look, we're using artificial intelligence every day inside of Verifone today. We're using it at the executive level. We're using it at the software development level. We're using it in day-to-day management. I mean, we're using it everywhere. The thing we find, right, is that you offload tasks that machine learning and artificial intelligence is very, very good at, writing specific code, monitoring processes, repetitive things, right? And then you free up the human mind for the things that humans are really good at: judgment, relationships, thought, strategic thinking, those kind of things. There's an ability now for the human to really focus on things that human brains are uniquely focused for. And that's what we're seeing, right? I mean, we're seeing developers not being replaced, but literally like being able to amp up their productivity and creativity. The other thing that's interesting, Jeff, from a technology perspective, is our ability now to prototype something goes from weeks to potentially days, right? Like I built a prototype of something I'm working on my desktop in a couple of days and sent all the code to a code repository and shot it over to our developers to take a look at, right? Like, now I don't know if they're happy about me doing that or not, but I think that just tells you, right? Like you can, it opens up the ability to dream, which is pretty cool. And then let me just close back on the data. Data normalization is also a great thing for AI, right? Like you give AI a schema and a bunch of data, that is something that it is very, very good at. So I think it's going to help our industry there. And coming back to where I started all this, our industry is in a really good spot because it has invested so much in standardization. And I think, my lineage, right? I mean, my dad was one of the originators of the NACS Tech Standards project that became PCATS, that became Connexus. And so for me, sitting here decades later, it's kind of cool to see that come full circle, and those standards are helping me every day in my job.
And coming full circle, there was a Verifone customer forum last week.
Yeah.
And you spent some time on stage with some NACS people and with some others. Want to talk about the vibe going in, what you were hearing from people at the conference, and what came out of the conference?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. Look, I think that the industry in general feels positive right now. I think, I just come from the SOI summit and the numbers looked solid, right? It is interesting to me how much our industry still relies on fuel profitability, right? And, given the volatility in fuel prices right now, that was certainly on people's minds. But I think that, people were interested to hear what we were doing about AI. I think, this is kind of what I got on the AI topic at the conference, is a lot of people have heard about AI, or they've heard the term, or maybe the soup of terms that sit around AI, whether it's LLM, model, generative AI, agentic AI, whatever, right? But people don't really understand how that stuff works in their day-to-day lives, right? So that was one of the things we tried to do at our customer forum was, really show how is AI helping us to make your support experience with us better? Or how is AI helping us deliver faster features to you? What can we build in our product that utilizes AI to help with loss prevention or other things? And I think people really appreciated that. You mentioned the NACS folks we had on stage. And I have a tremendous panel conversation with Margaret Mannion, who's the Director of Government Relations there at NACS, and Justin Mitchell, who's the CTO at Refuel Markets. And that was a really interesting panel. It's the first time we've ever really talked about regulation and the burden of regulation on the industry. We spent a lot of time talking about SNAP. We spent a lot of time talking about pennies because those are two things that affect the point of sale. I got to tell you, Jeff, I've spent more time in the last 9 months talking about pennies than I ever have in my life. And, ironically, Terry Richmond tried to get rid of the penny like 35 years ago. So I hope somewhere she's smiling. But, what was interesting about that panel is that we often overlook the technology burden on these regulations, right? Like we had to do a bunch of work to support the penny rounding. Justin talked about the work that his team is having to do to try to make sure that their price books are up to date in all of these different jurisdictions that are being hit by different SNAP regulations. We talked about e-cigarettes, and we talked about, how much work we do as an industry to ensure compliance with age restriction laws, and how, other industries maybe don't invest that. And I think that's a piece that often gets overlooked in these regulatory conversations, is that each and every one of them, whether it's statistical inventory reconciliation for underground storage tanks, or changes to the SNAP program, or penny rounding, or, restrictions on e-cigs, they all create a technology burden on top of an operational burden.
Yeah, and the penny is a perfect example. I've probably talked about the penny quite a bit the past year myself.
Right.
And
right.
The last penny, I know they talk about, it was minted in October. It was really minted in like May or June, just about a year ago. And then there were a couple, 5 kind of commemorative pennies that were made a couple months later. But it's been going on for a year. We're still waiting for resolution with Congress. And I would imagine once we do get resolution, it's not going to be like, and take a year or two to sort it out.
Yeah.
It's going to be a really, really short time frame, so that you're already moving forward on how do you develop a process, because it will come with specifications.
Yeah, I think all of the POS vendors in the industry have done a really good job of getting on this quickly, right? And I have competitors, but our competitors also support the industry, which I care a lot about, which is why I have encouraged everyone to do True Age, and I've been really impressed at how quickly everybody moved on the penny situation. I'll say this though, right? The lack of clarity meant that we had to build a much more flexible solution than we would have. Right, because since there's no national standards, and some state laws say you always have to, err in favor of the customer. Some put the choice on the merchant. I mean, it's kind of all over the place, right? So ultimately, we had to build an incredibly flexible solution, which took more time and effort than it would have taken if there had just been a national standard that said, 3 cents or below round down, 4 cents or above round up, or whatever, right? But there just wasn't. And so we had to build this incredibly flexible solution, which also puts a configuration burden on the merchant, right? Because that is a system setting that now has to be configured by the merchant. And I think, one thing I mentioned to Margaret on stage, and I said to the NACS GR team after Day on the Hill, was one of the things I think we should talk about more as an industry is the technology burden that certain regulations put on the industry. Because I don't think policymakers even think about the technology complexity of some of these regs.
Yeah, when you think about our industry conducts roughly 160 million transactions a day, whether at the pump inside the store.
Yep.
1 in 5 drivers fills up their tank every day, and that all has to be seamless, whether you're paying by debit, credit, cash, etc. And at the start, talked a little bit about theft and mismanagement at the
Yep.
pump. When in the early days, when you and I were both just starting, theft at the pump meant somebody said they were going to pay by cash and never went inside the store and paid. And that kind of disappeared right around 2005 after Hurricane Katrina. Gas prices hit $3 a gallon. That was crazy. So most people did prepay for cash.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that happened is, cash as a percentage of fuel sales continues to decline year over year over year. So there's just less demand for cash postpaid. By the way, it's still out there. There are a few sites out there that still do it, which blows me away. But you're right. I mean, our data shows that 90+% of sites do indoor prepay only for cash.
Yeah. So theft, or the bad guys have looked at other things besides cash. So there's some ways that you can manage that or identify that a little better at the pump, because one of the things with gas pumps is they're unattended, or person not present. So it's a little easier to test a card that might be stolen, to make sure it's live before you start ordering all those Game Boys and things like that happen when my card gets stolen.
Yeah.
So can you kind of walk us through some of the things where you're able to detect possible theft faster?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. Look, I think first off, yes, I mean, the unattended fuel dispenser has always been the test bed for a fake card or a stolen card, right? Like, take it to the gas pump, and if it works, you're good to go. More recently, probably the last 5 years or so, it's not so much that as it is actually stealing the gas, right? And tricking the pump somehow and stealing the gas in some sort of converted vehicle that can then be sold down the street, at a discount. And so we've seen a lot of that. EMV has made duplicate card fraud much, much more difficult. It's also introduced its own challenges. But typically what we tend to see is people trying to trick the pump, right? They're trying to trick the pump into giving them fuel that they didn't have to pay for. And, there's a variety of different ways that they try to do that. I would say there's a couple of things that people need to think about, right? You always want to make sure your pumps are on the latest firmware. Like, jacks are better, right? Like, you got to have your pumps on. And I know it's expensive. You can't do it necessarily remotely. You have to have a tech come out. Techs cost, money, but having your pumps on the latest firmware is critical. Point of sale software on the latest versions, right? Like, we all work really, really hard when something pops up. And I'll say this about us. I'll say this about the other POS providers in the industry. We all work really, really hard to shut down anything as soon as it comes up. And most of that stuff is fixed. And then, there are sites out there that just don't upgrade, right? Like, I had a call from someone not too long ago about a group of sites that were on super old version of software that was prone to a particular exploit that really didn't have anything to do with our software, but we were able to patch it. And so, firmware, POS software being updated. And then I think, there are a lot of really, really good above store theft detection tools. There are a lot of vendors that take POS data, they take data off of the tank gauge monitor, and they look for anomalies that would suggest that some sort of theft is happening, right? And that, or it could not even be theft. It could just be bad flow on the pump, or it could be potentially a leaky tank, like, who knows? But I think looking at those kind of systems is something that I would recommend. And, coming back to what we said about data, this is an area where, artificial intelligence, and not necessarily Claude or GPT, but just true machine learning, like deep neural network machine learning, should start to make the predictions about what's happening a lot better. And And my read is that the companies that do that for a living are already investing in those models. There are good loss prevention tools out there that are AI driven. I don't know exactly how great they are. I haven't played around with any of them, but from what I've read, they seem to be really good. And I do think like a frontier for us in terms of AI usage and machine learning usage is building better loss prevention, right? Today, loss prevention is very algorithmic, right? If a cashier trips a certain number of voids, I'm going to take a look at their transactions, right? I'm going to ask my manager to review video on 15 transactions every day, right? Or if I see a certain pattern of increase of returns, then I'm going to take a look, right? But it's very algorithmic. It's kind of old school rules-based AI. And I think we're going to get to a point where you could train a model to really find signal in the data that maybe would be surprising and against conventional wisdom.
And it more in real time as opposed to, I'll do it when I have a chance or I review them once a month or whatever it is. By then,
imagine if like you were a loss prevention guy or person at a store, right? And you could in real time be told, hey, we think that, clerk A at store 12 is stealing right now. And here's exactly what we think they're doing. We think they're converting cigarettes to cash by underringing, right? And here are the 3 things to go look for when you go to the store, right? Imagine if you could get that as a loss prevention officer and go to that store and literally catch them in the act with like the pennies on the cash drawer that they're using to count how many packs they've converted, right? Like, I think that would be game changing in terms of loss prevention. I think you do the same thing around fuel, but I think this is an area where we are ripe to deploy machine learning tools.
And of course, they're going to have to start using nickels for those
right. They don't even have any
markers
a little bit, right? Paperclip.
No, I know. Going to some of those meetings, people talk about like paper clips or whatever it is. So bit of a joke, but just simple things like that don't look like anything to somebody that's not paying attention. Just that's easy ways to keep moving a scam along.
Yep.
So with the focus, as I said, on higher gas prices now, there's also a lot of myths going on out there.
Mm-hmm.
There's a great article that came out in CNN today talking about how retailers don't really make all that much money when gas prices go up. In fact, they tend to do worse. There's also, if you go on social media, please don't. All these videos, this is going on at the pump, therefore you should never go to this pump. I saw something today that involved something with a dry wall screw, easy to say, that somehow was positioned in some place and that never turns off the pump and then you're able to steal and all that other stuff. And of course, it's not true.
Right.
Are there any big things that you've heard out there related to POS systems that it's like, okay, people, this is not real. Please stop.
Yeah. That's an interesting question. I don't know that I really have related to POS systems. I think there is a unfortunate belief that when we scan driver's license, here's one. Yep, you know what? I got one. I think there is an unfortunate belief that when we scan driver's licenses to validate people's identification, that we are somehow capturing and storing their personal identifiable information, right? Like in fact, I think there's been some claims made in that respect. And, I can assure everyone that both when we do local validation and also when we use TrueAge, that no information is ever stored other than, whether or not a valid ID check was done and the date of birth of the person. But there's no way to track that date of birth back to a person in the T-log. So I think that's one that is out there that people are making hay about, but there is no personally identifiable information stored in the POS system anywhere.
Yeah, and that's part of the DNA of TrueAge, which was set up to do exactly that. And It was around personal security, that there's only a couple lines. Is the card live? Is this a 21 or older person or whatever age for whatever product? And that's it. And it is consumer friendly. And since you mentioned it, James, you have been an amazing advocate for True Age and moving it along as being something that is very useful and very important for our industry. So I want to commend you for that.
Thank you. Thank you. Look, I think on the True Age front, first off, incredible work done by everyone involved. I know a lot of people in the industry have pitched in. I know NACS has put up money. I know many of the suppliers have put up money. I know there's been a lot of sweat equity on the behalf of a lot of people, and it's absolutely incredible work. Look, when I got presented True Age, and I was running product at the time for Verifone for Petroleum convenience store, given my industry background, I mean, if you go all the way back, to when I was 16, my first job was running the cash register at a mobile station in Fair Lakes, Virginia. And so I've been checking IDs forever, right? Like I've been selling cigarettes forever, it feels like, in some way, shape, or form. And, I immediately saw the benefit of True Age in terms of taking a lot of the operational burden off the hands of the cashier, right? It's a really, it's a really difficult thing to ask the cashier to have to do, right? Like to validate people's age and to decline sales. And if you can offload that to a system, it takes a huge operational burden. So I got that. The other thing is I lived through the e-cig situation where, convenience stores were very close to losing the ability to sell e-cigs, and we had to do a whole bunch of technology work very, very quickly in order to convince regulators that we were okay to sell, products like that. And, if I look to the future, it feels like we're on the cusp of a whole new generation of age-restricted products that are going to be available in our stores very soon. And losing the public's confidence in our ability to sell those products will essentially take them out of our hands. So, look, I got it from an industry perspective very, very quickly, and that's why we jumped on board. And then, when I got promoted into the role that I'm in now, we were able to even supercharge it a little bit more just because I have more influence over our direction. The only other thing I want to say about that is, I recognize that, we are the number one provider of point of sale technology to gas stations and convenience stores in the U.S. So we have, we have more sites installed than any other point of sale provider. And that's a cool thing. But I also look at it as a pretty significant responsibility, to an industry that I care about, has been very good to me and to my family. So, me and my team, we don't take that lightly. We really look at that install base as a responsibility. And it means when, you all come to us with stuff that is good for the industry as a whole, whether it's Prosper, whether it's True Age, we're gonna sign up. We're just gonna sign up because we know that for us to be successful, the industry has to.
Well, thank you. With all the things that you are involved in, the customer, SNAP, the penny, gas, in-store sales, I imagine we'll be talking again more sooner than later about what's going on and what retailers need to know. So, James, thanks for joining us today.
Oh, it's absolutely a pleasure, Jeff. I really hope the Mets turn it around this season. I know it's a little rough for you right now. Cubs are looking really good. I know it's early, but I do hope they turn it around.
Oh, we still have 1986. That was just a couple years ago, right?
And 64. Or sorry,
69. Yes.
Yeah, 69.
69.
Yes.
Yep.
Always great to talk with you, Jeff. I got to tell you, you and the team there at NACS are doing an absolutely amazing job on behalf of the industry. And having known many of you for 3 decades now, it's just a real pleasure to see the great things that y'all are up to.
Thanks again, James.
Of course.
And thank you all for listening to Convenience Matters.
Convenience Matters is brought to you by NACS and produced in partnership with Human Factor. For more information, visit convenience.org.